Hello, all sports fans, and welcome to the fifth episode of All Sorts of Sports Shorts. I know I've been talking about doing an NBA episode every episode so far, and here's one finally. My special guest this episode is an old high school friend and longtime fan of the NBA, Dacota Haynes, and we'll be breaking down the Blazers' position in a Los Angeles-dominated West, everything going on in the NBA right before the All-Star break, and break down the heating up MVP race. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to your completely non-opinionated and super statistical sports podcast, All Sorts of Sports Shorts, hosted by a man that could outscreen most goats, plug in a cell phone charger with a single foot, and occasionally refuses to acknowledge the metric system, Nicholas Sarysz.
I have my guest here with me, Dacota Haynes. Dacota, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join you there, Nick. I'm really interested to dive in about basketball as it's going well in the NBA this season.
Yeah, it's we're just a few weeks off of the All-Star break. Things are starting to heat up in the standings and the MVP race alike.
Yeah, Damian Lillard is putting himself out there in the MVP race with his recent stretch of 6 games when he had 200 plus points.
Yeah, he's managed to get in the top 3 in points per game in the league, and he's top 5 in assists right now currently as well.
Yeah, I saw something on Instagram today. It said that he made NBA history for the most counted for points in a 6-game stretch, which he had like 141 assists and 260 points or something like that. It was a crazy amount.
He has been doing wonderful, and sadly, the way it is, he's still considered a sleeper pick or almost a dark horse for the MVP race since Giannis and LeBron James seem to still be at the forefront for that.
Yeah, I think it could help him with that race when the Blazers get Jusuf Nurkic and Zach Collins back. Right now, they just don't seem to have enough to start winning a ton of games because all they have is him and Whiteside and CJ at this point that are scoring in double digits every single night and being consistent. But I think with the addition of Trevor Ariza and then Zach Collins and Jusuf Nurkic coming back after the All-Star break, it'll really help them.
I agree, and I definitely think the Trevor Ariza trade is going to do wonders for Damian Lillard and the Blazers into the future. Finally having a starting guard that is defensive focused, something that they seem to not have for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean they somewhat had one with Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless last year, but they were more of a forward than a guard.
And they've actually moved up all the way from 11th. They haven't moved up that far, but they moved up from 11th to 9th in the standings in the past 6 games. And they're now just 2.5 games off of the 8th place spot.
Yeah, it's remarkable at how much Dame's stretch put them up there. I could honestly see them going as far as 6th or 7th by the end of the year.
I definitely see them maybe pushing for that 7th spot because the Thunder currently hold it right now, although they do have quite the lead, having 7.5 games over the Blazers at this point. But if the Blazers can pull it together with less injuries in the back half of the season, I think they can make a push to get a higher spot in those playoffs.
Yeah, and like I said, the addition of Jusuf Nurkic at the All-Star break or after the All-Star break is really going to help that because he's a stud down low, and we saw that a lot last year. He was having the best year of his career before his injury, and it was horrible to see that kind of thing for a player who was having his best year of his career.
That's very true. It's especially hurtful to see that happen in a double overtime game against a poor performing team in the Brooklyn Nets as they were last year. To see that have to happen at the end of his season was rough.
Yeah, and it kind of derailed the Portland Trailblazers season from there because, all they had at center was Enes Kanter and Myers Leonard. But the Blazers made it as far as the Western Conference Finals, which I honestly think they could have beat Golden State or at least given Golden State a run in the Western Conference Finals to make it to the NBA Finals.
I still think they definitely did give Golden State a run for the money because there was 3 games in that series where they had a double-digit lead in the third quarter, and 2 of those were over 17-point leads in the third quarter, but they blew it towards the end just because they lacked the defensive lockdown that they have struggled through for many years.
I think that if they had Nurkic or even Whiteside at this point, because Whiteside is just blocking the crap out of shots, if they had either one of those guys down low last year, then it would have been a different story.
I definitely agree there, and I think having Whiteside has been a big help this year, although some people have deemed him as being lazy in the paint, and if you watch some of the games, you realize he is pretty heavy on his feet sometimes in some of the offensive possessions, although he does seem to be a big defensive presence.
Yeah, he is a very good defensive presence, and it shows in most of the Blazers games. Last night he was kind of in a lot of foul trouble, which is a reason why the Blazers lost by 25 to 30 points to the Denver Nuggets, because he was he had like 5 fouls at the half.
Oh, and not to mention the Denver Nuggets are, as far as roster is concerned, a far better team than the Blazers currently, because they're only 4 games off the lead in the Western Conference.
Right, and they did just make a trade the other night to kind of buff up their team a little bit. They had to get rid of that Juancho Hernan-Gomez, but they picked up Noah Vonleh.
And I think that really helps the Nuggets down in the post.
Yeah, Noah Vonleh, a former Blazer. He didn't do too well with the Blazers, but his last season he was really starting to come into form. He's kind of having a pretty good season of his own.
Right, and in the Western Conference, in that kind of 3-4-5 mix, the Jazz held the 3 position, but they're on a losing streak of 4 games, and they're only half a game in front of the 5th place spot. Do you see them slipping at all throughout the rest of this back half of the season, or do you think they'll pick it back up after this losing streak?
I don't particularly see them dropping too far. I think they could drop to either the 5 or the 6, but Utah has a very good team, and they're gonna figure it out with Donovan Mitchell at point. They're gonna figure things out, and it's gonna lead up into the postseason, and it's gonna be a very tight race.
Do you think they're going to end up ahead of the Rockets this year?
It's hard to say. I think so, because the Rockets just got rid of their center in Clint Capella. It's going to allow teams to drive to the paint more and get more points at the rim.
Well, especially past their guards, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who, although they're known to be flashy players, their defense this year hasn't been anywhere near top tier.
Yeah, those 2 guys are not very defensive guys. I mean, if you take a look back at Dame's stretch, Damian Lillard had a triple-double against Russell Westbrook.
Which was his first triple-double of his career.
Yeah, and that was just phenomenal to see. I mean, I wish he had more triple-doubles than just one at this point in his career. But needless to say, it's nice to see him finally get that first one, and I think more are going to be coming here pretty soon.
All right, and it's definitely been tough for the Blazers being injury-riddled in such a tough Western Conference where the Los Angeles teams are dominating, but that 3-4-5 and even the 6 with the Mavericks have really strong teams.
Yeah, no question. All 3 of those teams are pretty good.
It's much different in the Western Conference, as it seems to have been in the past NBA seasons, where all that's going on is in the Eastern Conference is that the Bucks have the number 1 spot by 6.5 games, and Kyrie Irving finally got a haircut.
Kyrie Irving needed a haircut. It looks like, unfortunately, his knees are killing him again, but it's good to see that he got rid of that afro.
Lost a couple pounds of hair. And the thing about the Eastern Conference this year is, although the Bucks have the best record in the NBA at 43-7 currently, is that the 7 and 8 teams, the Nets and the Magic, they don't even hold 500 records. And not even close, might I mention. The Nets are 4 games off of a 500 record, and the Magic are 6.
Right. They still don't have Kevin Durant.
Oh, right. And he's not going to be back this year, is he?
No. He's out for the season.
Right. So next year, if Kevin Durant can come back and be the player he was in Golden State, then I think that the Nets are going to be a force to be reckoned with. But I still don't think they'll be able to surpass the Bucks in the East.
They've gotten better with the additions that they made of Wesley Matthews and Robin Lopez.
I agree for sure, especially getting Wesley Matthews and having Chris Middleton on the team. Having those 2 shooters alongside with Giannis is very helpful for their offense and defense alike.
Yeah. Rolo is a very defensive center. He's not great offensively, but he can still put up some numbers.
All right, and Giannis has the highest efficiency in the league to date.
Yeah, Giannis is, as his nickname says, he's a freak. He's having an MVP caliber year once again, as he always does. He's showing why he deserves that MVP.
Before we kind of wrap this up, do you have any early MVP predictions?
I think it's going to come down to the last game of the year at this point with Dame, LeBron, and Giannis.
You really think Dame's in the mix here?
I do. If he can continue the stretch that he's on, averaging like 29 points per game, I think he'll be in the mix.
Okay. As much as it hurts to say, I'd almost have to disagree with you. Just the fact that he's the past 5 games before this last game against the Nuggets, he averaged over 45 points a game, and he didn't even get Western Conference Player of the Month.
Yeah,
I mean, I just think them being in the small market, the NBA is not going to give him the light of day.
I think it has to do with the fact that he's in a small market. But once the second half of the season comes around, I think the Blazers are going to go on a roll, and they're going to win a lot of games, which is going to really propel the talks about Damian Lillard for MVP.
I'd have to agree with you there. I think if they definitely slip into 8 and 7, then even if they're fighting to be, a well over 500 team by the time they're not so injury riddled, I think definitely Blazers will be looked at a lot more. But I think even in comparison to last year in the playoffs, that they're still not going to get looked at enough for Damian Lillard to even be in the top 3.
Well, and the fact that Lillard also made the All-Star game this year, and as well as the 3-point contest, which they added some new rules to, I think that could help Lillard as well if he wins that.
Do you think he's going to win that?
I think he could with the new shots that they added to it.
I'd have to agree the way Damian Lillard, I mean, against the Rockets, he literally pulled up from the logo. And he hit.
Yeah, his nickname is Logo Lillard. I mean, teams don't realize that he will pull up from there if you don't leave him or if you leave him open.
Even if you don't, he will still pull up.
Yeah, and he even said in one of the post-game shows, one of the reporters was asking him if he's ever thought about pulling up from behind the half-court line, and he said Terry Stotts would be mad if he did, but he didn't rule out the ever given that an opportunity.
I mean, it's astonishing that that's even a thought, and that's something you can even joke about with a guy in the NBA nowadays, and that's just the way the game itself has shifted, and it's a shooter's ball game nowadays.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just look at what Lillard has done. He's had at least 6 or more threes in those last 6 games. When he had 200 plus points in that 6-game stretch, he had at least 6 threes in those games.
All right, and looking at the dynamic, honestly, of who has been the best out of all the team this year, I think that in order for the Trailblazers to ever win a championship with Damian Lillard in his prime, they're going to have a superstar center, is what it comes down to. Because if look at what LeBron did last year with the Lakers in comparison to what he's been able to do this year, honestly, just off the pick and roll game with the superstar and Anthony Davis.
Right, and I think the Blazers had that last year with Nurkic, but the fact that they lost him at right before the playoff season just didn't help him.
But I mean, I personally don't even think that Nurkic is going to be the answer, because Nurkic isn't somebody that spreads the floor, and even in the pick and roll game, he's not as fast as some of these superstar centers are.
Would you say that Whiteside is the answer?
Definitely, with the way Whiteside has been, just with inconsistent energy levels on offense. I mean, he's been stellar on defense, but with his inconsistent energy levels on offense, I don't think he is the answer either.
All right. Well, I don't know who the answer would be at this point for the Blazers at the center position, but I do think that Dame and CJ could win a championship together at some point, with whether it's within the next 3 years or whether it's towards the end of Dame's career.
Really? You think that Damian could do it with CJ McCollum in the backcourt with him?
I do, because
what defensive pieces do you think they need? Because I almost feel like Damian and CJ, not personally, but I know it's been claimed that Damian and CJ are a liability in the backcourt on defense.
People say that it's a liability, but if you take a look at the stats, it actually does not show that Dame and CJ are a liability. I mean, they have both increased their defense over the past 6 years. Since they've been together, they have both increased their defense. Dame is averaging like a little over 1 steal per game at this point in the season. And I think they have what they need in Trevor Ariza right now, because he's a wing defender and he's a 3-and-D type of player.
Okay. I guess I definitely see them having the ability without all the injuries, because I know this year they were almost going for that type of deal, but I think they're going to need a lot deeper of a bench than people like Mario Hezonja on that bench, because, I mean, honestly, some of the guys they have on the bench now just deserve to be on the stunt team, not the basketball team.
Yes. I think this season is going to give their young guys a chance. It's going to really give Gary Trent Jr.
who has been flourishing recently, by the way.
Indeed.
They're definitely missing a lot of pieces now, but I think you do have a point in the fact that it is something that they can fix in the future, but what it's really going to require is cap space.
Indeed. Carmelo Anthony said that he wants to stay a Blazer for the rest of his career, and he he could see Portland being somewhere that he retires.
Well, I mean, Carmelo Anthony's career is maybe 2 years out from being over at this point, though. So if they really want to do it with him, they're going to have to do it quick.
Yeah.
But I think he has been a key piece this year, and maybe he can't be next year, but just the way Carmelo Anthony's recent past has been, I don't know how well that's going to necessarily work out for their future.
I think it could work out, but just the way that Dame has been scoring himself, it really hasn't given Carmelo a chance to do anything. I mean, Dame has been passing the ball, don't get me wrong there, but Carmelo just hasn't gotten the ball enough, I'd say, to necessarily be the player that he is.
Interesting, but I feel like that is almost a contradiction to the way Dame and CJ play, because they like to play off dribble a lot. I feel like some of CJ's best shots and Damian Lillard's three-pointers come off the dribble.
Right, and you're not wrong there. I don't know. I just think that Carmelo Anthony works really well alongside Dame and CJ from what we saw so far this season. We did see a CJ-less team, and it looked like Dame and Melo were getting along better without CJ, but I think it could really work out between those three once they get Nurkic back.
Yeah, like I said, I definitely think it might require more than Nurkic at center for them to be championship contenders, but I think if they have a full gear where everybody's healthy and they have another shooter back in Rodney Hood, and they have Nurkic and even hopefully Whiteside and Collins, they would have definitely a lot more depth than they do this year. And if Gary Trent Jr. is able to, and Anthony Simons are able to keep progressing at the rate they have been in the past about 20 games or so, I think that they will have a much stronger team next season.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I could see that. I don't know if the Blazers will be able to keep Hassan Whiteside just due to salary or not. But it'd be interesting to see what Neil O'Shea does in the offseason.
Right. His track record hasn't been great so far, though. So do you think he's going to do anything here at the trade deadline?
I don't see him do anything at the trade deadline. They're really looking at keeping Hassan Whiteside because, Nurkic is only going to get 15 to 20 minutes here the rest of the season, just so that way he comes along slowly. And so it's not going to be enough at the center position. They're going to have to go small ball the rest of the way, which would not be great for this team because they rely on a center in the way that they play. And they're going to need a center in either Hassan Whiteside or Yusuf Nurkic of that caliber to make it to the postseason.
You're definitely on the right track with that thought for sure. Well, Dacota, thank you for being on this episode of the podcast. It was nice to have somebody here to discuss the NBA, but more importantly, the Portland Trail Blazers so far, and that the season they're having, and that the season they hopefully will have in the future. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join in.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of All Sorts of Sports Shorts. I'd like to apologize for any audio altercations on my end, as we were having trouble with the external cables with the microphone. If you enjoyed this podcast, why don't you go ahead and tell any other sports fans about it, and be on the lookout for more episodes as the NBA season heats up. Much ado and thanks.